Okay, we're on the air. Good morning, actually, or whatever time it is in your place. My name is Bernardus, and today we will be talking about Kotlin and null safety. This is a part of my 2.5-year engineering plan, and now we are entering issue number 25. And if I'm not mistaken, this is week 24. I couldn't do issue number 24 because I was busy, and literally my computer broke. So now here we are on the in in or on in the Kotlin month. So today, as I've said in the beginning, we will be talking about null safety and types. So this is the GitHub issue, as you can see right here. You can visit the repository under the name of Bernard Dust Engineering Roadmap and issues number 25. But for today, I'll be explaining it via the, how should I say, Obsidian nodes I've created. That is the exact same thing, and while coding simultaneously inside Kotlin IntelliJ. So without further ado, let's get started. So no more boilerplate. This is day one. So when you look at a Kotlin file, especially the main entrance, there's one thing that you might notice. Where's the public static void string main args? Even though Java have been making some progress with the unnamed instances, unnamed class or unnamed instances, I forget, which means you don't need to write public static void string main args anymore. You can just type void main. Kotlin has achieved that feat long before Java. So the main entrance in Kotlin is function main. But before we dive deeper, we need to know what Java Virtual Machine is. Java Virtual Machine is the one interpreting bytecode, while Java compiler, Java C, is the one compiling Java files into .class or bytecode. In Kotlin, we have Kotlin C. So because JVM doesn't care about anything other than receiving and running bytecode, .class files, you can use multiple Java virtual machine languages like Java, Scala, Groovy, and Kotlin. This is a bit off topic, but I think it'll be a nice, how should I say it? Nice fun fact. Let me check. Okay, still ongoing. Most programming languages, especially ahead of time compilation languages, basically compiled languages, have their way of being converted from readable code or source code to instruction for CPU in three parts: the front end, middle end, and back end, all having different purposes. For example, GCC has different front ends: GCC for C and G++ for C++. And the middle end is for optimizing the code structure, while the back end is for transforming code into the machine code, into the binary we know. Clang is also like that, with clearer separation of concerns. Clang is the front end, whose job is to turn .c files into LLVM immediate representation. This is fed into the middle end, which is called the LLVM optimizer, which is then fed into the back end, that turns the LLVM into machine code. This is what I know, my own understanding. If you have any correction, please correct me in the comment section down below. So let's continue. Java with Java C and Kotlin with Kotlin C are the same. They are front end for their respective languages that produces .class bytecode. When fed into the Java virtual machine, the JVM will immediately execute the bytecode. So remember in the beginning of Java learning, or maybe even in C, that just in time compiled languages have their source code compiled into bytecode first. In this case, JVM takes .class. For the JIT languages, the .bytecode is immediately interpreted. So from top to bottom, it is immediately executed. But remember, the hot module compilation, not hot module, hot method compilation or whatever thing. But what that means is codes that are frequently executed will be compiled. This is the same case with Java Virtual Machine. Frequently executed code / method called hotspot, yes hotspot, when fed into the just-in-time compiler, the bytecode passes the middle end to turn the bytecode into immediate representation before being fed to the back end to transform into machine code. Again, this is my own understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm learning in public and I am not teaching anyone. So I got some of my information from this blog right here. You can check it out, but again, let's continue. So precisely because of this clear separation between front-end and compiler and JVM, Kotlin can remove many weights of the Java language, like main entry filled with boilerplate, while simultaneously adding multiple features like coroutines and null safety, while retaining 100% interruptibility or compatibility with Java and other JVM languages. Long live function. I'm stressed, man. Oh my god. Okay, there is only one type. Not literally one type, but we'll get into that later because of the smart compiler. Again, Kotlin C is really doing the heavy lifting here. Because in the end, if we want to compile into Kotlin JVM, you need to abide by the JVM rules. But because you control the compiler, you can still do pretty much everything. You can do many stuffs in it, yes, okay. In Java, we have primitives and object wrapper. This adds the capability that integer can be null. Not that it is very good, but still, every list and map and every collections stores the object wrapper, not the primitives. In Kotlin, we have type inference. Even though Java has FAR now, in Kotlin, we fully rely on type inference. Val for immutable value, file value for immutable value, var for mutable variable. But that is not why we're here today. In Kotlin, unlike Java, we do not have int and integer. We only have int with E capital that the compiler decides is primitive or object. This is typo right here. There are a lot of more types, but mostly just look it up on this Kotlin Zur basic types. Making sure that okay, still recording. So we enter now collections. So based on Kotlin Zur collections, we have three kinds of collections in Kotlin. You can still import Java's collection or somehow use Kotlin's hash map. So this is what part that I'm confused. Let me var hash map sama dengan. Now we have hash map, right? It is Kotlin collection, but it is not listed here, so I'm confused because of that. But still, let's continue. We have three kinds of collections in Kotlin. You can still import Java's collection or somehow use Kotlin's hash map, but on the documentation side, there are three available ones. The first one is list. It is ordered collection of item that allows duplicate. The immutable version is list with list of. So what do I mean by the mutable version? Let's say var, this is a list. This is the type, right? List. But then to create that, we need list of string. So now we can have this. We actually do not need to write the type. So yeah, this is type inference on action. So to create the collection, we use the of method function in this case in Kotlin. So the mutable version is mutable list with mutable list of. Next, set. Set stores unordered items and doesn't allow duplicate. It is set with set of, mutable set with mutable set of, and map. It is the same as Java collection. Under the hood, all of these have their corresponding Java collection inside. And this is done so that we do not need to convert Kotlin's special collection into a Java type. The underlying collection is the same. Next, we get into Lambda, function over charts. I know Lambda is great, but when I was learning this yesterday or 2 days ago, I I couldn't really process it, so because I'm still sick, man. Come on. I know Lambda is great, but sometimes it's confusing. I'll try to explain it slowly, alright? You can store Lambda in a variable. So like JavaScript, we can store a whole function inside a variable. This is because function itself is also a type. Similar to JavaScript, the type for a lambda slash function that takes a string and returns a string is inside a parenthesis string arrow string. So technically, a function can return a lambda. Not sure what you use that since I'm still in my first hour of Kotlin or my first day. Today is the third day. I don't even know if this counts, but we'll see later. You can also call a lambda immediately after declaring just by adding parenthesis dot. Just by adding parenthesis, not parenthesis dot. And trailing lambda means if the only parameter is the lambda, or if the last parameter is a lambda or Java consumer, you can omit the empty parenthesis and immediately follow the function with I don't know what this is. Curly braces. Yes, curly braces. This is also interruptible with Java consumer, so calling a Java method that accepts a consumer can also be followed by a trailing lambda. So, I'm sorry. We are entering class now. Class are public and classes are public by default and final by default. Most of the time, are we building a package private or public method slash class? We create a public so that users can access it. We rarely use package private in Java except for internal testing. So that's why Kotlin's classes and methods are public by default. At the same time, class is final by default. So nobody can extend or inherit your class unless explicitly allowed via open keyword. At the same time, next, remove package private. Normally in Java, and while I use daily for building leftists, because I need to be able to test private and internal methods without exposing them to developers, but anyone can just create the XSM structure and use it. So that's why the internal keyword exists. It basically means anyone with the same module, whether it is a Maven project, Gradle project, or IntelliJ IDEA module, can access this, not an outsider, which is far more useful and secure than package private. Record-like way to define properties. In Kotlin, you have two ways of declaring properties. The first one, inside this example, is inside the parenthesis after the class name. So you can see inside the parenthesis or inside the class body like usual. Then we have null safety. No penguin is allowed. Now, when I look at Kotlin null safety, I'm grateful, yes. I'm really grateful that I've already learned JavaScript and TypeScript because it is very similar. String for non-nullable and string question mark for nullable. And non-nullable doesn't accept nullable. Just like TypeScript, when calling a method on a nullable, to be safe, just use the question mark to be safe. And it will return null if the argument is also null. But in Kotlin, we have what is called the Elvis operator. If the left side is null, what is on the right side of the Elvis operator will be returned instead. That is for day one, and I ask for your apology. I need to sniff a bit. I forgot about the mix. Sorry, my bad. So day two, null safety taken to the extreme. Shalom, welcome back. Okay, now relevant to our documentation. Okay, next we have scope function. This is reducing the explosion radius. So we know scope, something inside curly braces that is considered a local scope and cannot be accessed globally. But now in Kotlin we have 5 function scope, and I found one exceptionally good at null safety. We won't dive deep into all 5, but we'll focus on let. Let is a scope function, which is a part of generic extension function on type T. Its primary use case, as defined in the Kotlin tour intermediate scope functions HTML is to perform null check, though it can do so much more because it returns a lambda result. Let is different than run because run's primary usage is for initialization and modifying the variable at the same time. Both return the lambda's result, but it's just pedantic usage. So you can say let is for quick computation, perfect for null checking. This let only executes if the object is not null. And because a notification returns an object, string in Kotlin stocks, but for convenience we'll use boolean here. It'll be null. It'll be null if the object is null. And remember the office operator, we can juxtapose it here. So notification turns true if the object is not null, and if it does null, we can safely return to false. Safe indeed. Next, this is less of a null safety and more of a type and slashing boilerplate. So ever wonder how you can reduce boilerplate when handling with inheritance? Say no more. Delegation. In the example down below, we have interface printer, which has the blueprint for function print, and then we have class fast printer that extends printer inherits from that extends printer, and then we have override function print. And then we have printer is an interface. So basically delegate lets you send any concrete object and have the and have the inheritance automatically be set up for you. That's the best way I can explain it. So with inheritance, when you change even the slightest code in the parent class, you risk breaking the whole chain of scheme. That's where delegation comes in. It allows you to define a default method but pass any concrete implementation. So as you can see right here, if we inherit from base, I promise to implement the base, so I must write all the code for base myself. For extending inheritance, I will pass the blueprint and you must implement everything yourself. As for delegation, you need to pass any concrete class implementation, but it will be automatically set, so you don't need to override everything. So let's say inside the base interface I have basically it will be set up. It will point everything to the new by B right here. So everything, the concrete class that will be passed by B, everything that points to the B will be automatically set up inside, I think. Yes, probably something like it. I'm still confused about this one, but that's the best way I can explain it. You can pass any concrete implementation, but if not, I already have the default anyway. So now we have objects. So I didn't explain this yesterday, but to replace plain old Java object, Kotlin has what is called data class. It holds your data and you can get the data immediately like record. But whether it is mutable or not is based on your decision. So now we have object keyword. This basically means singleton class. It acts as a singleton that can hold data and function without any declaration. A clear way to do singleton. And as a fun fact, Kotlin doesn't have static keyword. It is replaced by this. And another fun fact, objects are lazy, so they don't get instantiated until you call them. There are 3 types of object. A classic singleton that holds data and method is a plain object. It is used for utility classes, helpers, or singletons holding functionality. The keyword is object class name. Data object, similar to data class, a singleton that holds data specifically. It can hold method but most commonly used for data holding singletons. It is used when the object represents a namespace or even inside a sealed hierarchy. The keyword is data object class name. The last one is companion object. One companion per class, similar to static class in static class. It is used when all instances of a class need shared information. Companion object class name. Special classes. So I don't want to continue even longer. I need to finish this ASAP. We're almost at the finish anyway. I barely code. Why do I even open this? Okay, let's just The first special class is sealed class. By default, classes are final and public. Sealed class is by default abstract and package private. You need concrete implementation, and because it is not inheritable outside of the package, you cannot use it. It is limited to the same package and module with the exception of Kotlin multi-platform, same source set. The enum class. I don't even know why I document this. This is the same as Java enum. They just added class to make it more specific. And next, inline value classes. This is value classes. This is from my own experience. Have you ever done it when you want to create something in the database and you accidentally stored email as password and password as email? Yeah, me too. So that's why inline value exists. Without paying a heavy performance tax, we can create inline value with method so we don't confuse email with password. The last one, this is type checking and casting. This is for type safety. Is checks if the type is the same. Not is checks the type is not the same and returns a boolean value. As is for safely casting and up, it is unsafe casting, because if it is undoable, it will crash the whole program. Safe operator instead will only return null. So this is the list of for null safety. This is for list, method for list. We have filter not null. This is basically filtering the list for any null. Next we have list of not null. Create a list that doesn't allow null, and if all items are null, an empty list is returned. The next one is Kotlin also provide functions to find values in a collection that returns null instead of triggering an error. Max or null will return the highest value or null. Min or null is the lowest value. Single or null basically takes a lambda and return the first object that matches the lambda or null. First not null of no or null takes a lambda and returns the first value that is a null. Reduce or null, this creates a lambda expression to process each collection item sequentially and create a cumulative value or null if the collection is empty. Basically, if you want to append everything into one value, something like that. This is a bit quick, faster than my usual, partially because I'm sick, partially because I want to play games and rest. So yeah, I think that's all for today. I want to thank you for being with me today on the first week of Kotlin. I'm still fighting for my own willpower. I've been weak recently. I recently broke my streak of going to school. No, not something like that. I have never been absent for a single day since 7th grade, and I just broke it last Friday. So yeah, I wanna rest now, so tomorrow I can go to school. So I thank you for watching today's video. I, Bernardus, signing off. Thank you for watching this video.